Welcome to the 28th installment of the Goodman Lectures, which honor the legacy of a great Buddhist scholar, Stephen Goodman, who was also a great benefactor of Buddhism in general, but specifically a benefactor of the Khyentse Foundation activities. Today's topic is especially exciting, at least for me, which is lexicography. And Dr. Lata Deokar, who is going to speak today, is someone who has indeed done lexicography very religiously for a long time in many different locations through several different languages, including notably at least 3 important Buddhist languages, namely Sanskrit, Tibetan, and Pali. Dr. Deokar is from Savitribai Phule University, the Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies, which is truly a wonderful place to study Buddhism and a place of great significance for the local Buddhist community. So thanking very much Lata for accepting this invitation. I now leave it to her.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Mathia, for the introduction. I'm indeed grateful to the Khyentse Foundation, June, Professor Mathia, for suggesting me to deliver this lecture. I think the discussion started last year when June was here in Pune, and then Professor Mathia took it from there. And finally, today I'm here to share whatever I know about lexicography. As Professor Mathia said, I have been studying Sanskrit lexicons and to some extent Tibetan and Pali lexicons for last almost 2 decades or so. So when Professor Mathia asked me to decide the topic for today's lecture, I decided it doing lexicography religiously. Yeah. Next. Jack, can you share the screen? Yeah. Okay. So I decided this topic doing lexicography religiously, and when I decided the title, I wanted to play around the word religiously. The word means doing things faithfully, that is one thing, and doing things thoroughly, consistently, etc. So, and the second word from the title is lexicography. The word itself is derived from the combination of 2 Greek words, lexicon, which means stock or inventory of words in any language, and graphos is to inscribe or to write. So lexicography means writing words. Now, the word lexicography is associated with languages, so we can speak about Sanskrit lexicography, Pali lexicography, for instance. The science itself is a secular science, and hence it is not usually connected with a particular religion. We do not talk about Buddhist lexicography, for instance. When we browse through the history of Indian lexicography, or for that matter, history of Sanskrit lexicography, since Sanskrit was the predominant language associated with preservation of knowledge for over 2 millennia or so, what do we see? Next. So, numerous lexicons were written in India over this long period. The first extant one goes back several centuries before the Common Era, and the latest ones are written in pre-modern era. Most of these lexicons deal with Sanskrit vocabulary. Dhanapala's Paiya Lachi and Hemachandra's Deshi Nama Mala are exceptional in nature since they deal with the Prakrit and regional vocabulary. For next, the only Pali lexicon, Abhidhanappa Deepika, was written by a Sri Lankan scholar Chula Mogallana in the late 12th century. Next. One unique feature of Indian lexicons is that some of them have commentaries written on them. Whereas Amarkosh, the celebrated lexicon, has been commented upon at least 80 times, other lexicons such as Abhidhana Ratnamala and Vishwa Prakasha have been commented upon a few times. Then there are lexicographers who wrote auto commentaries to their respective lexicons, such as Hemachandra wrote an auto commentary on his Abhidhana Chintamani, and Mankha wrote auto commentary to his Nanartha Kosha. Next. Now, what is the role of commentators? Why commentators are important as far as Sanskrit lexicography or even Pali lexicography is concerned? So these commentaries, they provide information regarding etymology of words, their grammatical status, whether it's a noun or adjective or adverb, then spellings and genders of words. Many of them also provide mythological information and citations or passages from the literature. Commentators such as Kshiraswamin, Lingasurin, and Mallinatha, these are Amarakosha commentators, they supply the Amarakosha with words which were not included by Amarasingha. These additions are sometimes of a word or two, sometimes entire verses are suggested for inclusion. Additionally, these commentators also include regional equivalents of some of the words which were listed in the Amarakosha. Next. Then uh, there are two commentaries which were inspired by the Indian commentary literature. One is in Tibetan. The Tsigiter, which was composed in 1210 Common Era, word treasury of Sakya Pandita Kunga Gelson, is an abridged Tibetan translation of select passages from the Amarakosh. It was commented upon by Nyethang Lotsawa Lodoy Tempa. The name of the commentary is Donsel. And then in Pali, Abhidhanapadipika, the Pali lexicon which I mentioned a few minutes before, was commented upon several times in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. So, this art of writing a commentary on lexicons seems to have attracted scholars even in the modern age. For instance, a Sri Lankan monk scholar, Shilaskanda Mahathera, wrote a commentary on Purushottama Deva's Trikanda Shesha in the early 20th century. Thus, existence of the commentaries appears to be a unique feature of Indian lexicographical tradition, which inspired lexicographers in Sri Lanka, Burma, and Tibet. Next. Now, all these lexicographical treatises, whether lexicons themselves or their commentaries, were written by authors belonging to one of the three major Indian religions, Brahmanical, Buddhist, or Jain. In the field of literature, we often see that an author brings their worldview and their specific diction and vocabulary in their writings. Therefore, I was curious to see, even though lexicography is a secular science, whether we see a similar phenomenon in the field of lexicography. In other words, did religious affiliation of a lexicographer play any significant role in the compilation of a lexicon? That is, did it affect the vocabulary being included in a lexicon? Did lexicons written by Buddhist lexicographers have more representation of typically Buddhist vocabulary? The second question I wanted to investigate is, did Buddhist literature get more representation in the commentaries composed by Buddhist authors? Did it impact the ways citations are selected in a commentary? Next. By Buddhist vocabulary, I mean words which have a typically Buddhist context or even words which are more popular among Buddhist authors or texts. As an instance of the first type, we can consider words such as Bodhi, enlightenment, whereas the word like Adinava, fault, is an example of the second type. The word Adinava is a typically Buddhist word. It occurs in Pali and Sanskrit Buddhist literature. Amarasingha, to whom we will come in a minute or two, records it in his Amarakosha, Adi Navasravau Kleshe. The word is also recorded in the Pali dictionary Abhidhana Padipika, Doso Adi Navo Bhave. However, such a vocabulary is not exclusive to Buddhists. Sometimes a non-Buddhist Sanskrit author like Magha, who is well known for using rare or archaic words in his long poem Shishupala Vadha, has used this word. Yad Vasudeva Yad Vasudevena Adinam Vasudevenadinam Anadinavam Iritam. Vallabhadeva, the commentator of Magha, has explained the word Anadinava as Nirdosha, faultless. Another example is that of the word Kamaguna, which is predominantly used in the Buddhist literature. But at the same time, the word also occurs in texts such as Mahabharata, Ramayana, Vamana Purana, Brahma Purana, and Swachchanda Tantra. So, this vocabulary, which is common to Buddhists, needs to be studied from this aspect also, that whether the early vocabulary is shared by Mahabharata, at least Mahabharata, because there are many examples where we find a word used in Buddhist texts and then also in Mahabharata. So, I have approached these questions from two aspects: practical lexicography and theoretical lexicography. Next. What do we mean by practical lexicography? It is the art of writing a dictionary by following a certain scheme and meta rules. These meta rules are normally defined at the beginning of a lexicon, traditional lexicons, whereas theoretical lexicography is the study of semantic and orthographic study of lexemes, and by lexemes we mean basic units of meanings. In order to find answers to these questions, I studied a few lexicons and lexicographical commentaries written by Buddhists of India, Tibet, and Sri Lanka. This covers the practical lexicography aspect of my lecture. Next. There are some more questions which are posed by Pali literature. While browsing through the Pali canonical and commentarial literature, one cannot simply overlook lexicographical material which is included in it. It is full of verses listing synonyms of a word, strings of synonyms, strings of synonymous verbs, definitions of synonymy, and so on and so forth. This mine of information prompted me to study Pali literature from a theoretical lexicography aspect. How ancient Buddhists approached words and their meanings? How did they document meanings? Answers to all these questions will finally lead us to answer the question: did Buddhists do conventional lexicography, or did they did away for it with it? Sorry. Next. Now coming to practical lexicography. First point is structure of Sanskrit and Pali lexicons. Before we go through lexicons written by Buddhist scholars, let us briefly see the structure of Sanskrit and Pali lexicons. Most of them are synonymic in nature, with a small part dealing with homonyms, indeclinables, and gender of words which are included in that lexicon. Now, what is synonym? It's a word or phrase that means exactly or nearly the same as another word or phrase in the same language. And the word homonym means each of two or more words having the same spelling or pronunciation but different meanings and origins. Next. So, this division of Sanskrit lexicons, and for that matter, even Pali lexicons, into synonymous and homonymous parts itself goes back to a text which is called Nighantu. This Nighantu is the oldest Sanskrit term for the word lexicon, which means stock or inventory of words in any language. These Nighantus word lists were compiled in order to explain the rare unexplained, vague, or otherwise difficult terms that occurred in the sacred Vedic literature, especially the Rig Veda. Scholars believe that there must have been many such word lists, of which only one survived. This is the one which was commented upon by Yaska, who flourished before 5th century Common Era, in his commentary called Nirukta. Next. Now some few words about Nighantu. First thing is it is written in prose. It deals with all the four parts of speech: nouns, verbs, preverbs or prefixes, and indeclinables. It has 5 sections. The first 3 sections, which are called Naigantuka Kanda, are synonymic in nature, and they deal with physical objects, words related to man, abstract qualities, etc. The fourth section, which is called Naigama Kanda, it deals with homonyms, and the last section, Daivata Kanda, deals with deities. In Nighantu, the end of a particular list of synonyms is shown by repeating the last word of the list preceded by the word iti, which means thus. For instance, iti gauhu means thus end the synonyms of the word go, cow. This arrangement shows an earliest attempt to group words methodically. Next. Now, this particular scheme adopted for Sanskrit dictionaries does not leave much scope for a typically Buddhist dictionary. As one can see in such traditional dictionaries, there is scope for including only those words which fit either of the two main categories I mentioned before. The words should either be synonymic in nature or they should be homonymic or indeclinables. This certainly restricts the vocabulary that can be included in a traditional dictionary. One can include epithets of the Buddha, synonyms of the word Nibbana or Nirvana, for instance, but one cannot include words which are so foundational for Buddhism, for instance, Pratitya Samutpada, dependent origination, or the Four Noble Truths, or the Eightfold Noble Path, because they do not have synonyms or homonyms. Within these limitations, what did Buddhist lexicographers do? So they certainly tried to include some Buddhist vocabulary. Against this background, let us now go through the lexicons which are considered to be written by Buddhists. When I say considered to be written by Buddhists, it's just because the early lexicographers did not mention their faith. They rather, not early, the only lexicographer is Amarasingha, who tried to conceal his faith, and another one is supposed to be Buddhist by some internal evidence. So these are the secular dictionaries written by Buddhists. Yeah, next, sorry. The first one is Weber fragment. This is the first known Sanskrit lexicon. It is dated between the 6th and the 7th centuries Common Era. Its fragmentary manuscript is preserved in the so-called Weber manuscript. Most probably, this lexicon was written by Buddhists, since we find the phrase Kshatriyair Buddha Nirjitaihi, Kshatriyas conquered by the Buddha, on one of the folios. A part of this manuscript is already edited, but it does not include anything specific to Buddhism. So we cannot say much about this lexicon. We do not know its author, we do not know its name, nothing. Then the second known Buddhist lexicographer is Vyadi. In fact, in addition to this Weber fragment, passages from Bhaguri's Trikanda, Vyadi's Utpalini, Katya's Namamala, and Vikramaditya's Samsaravarta are cited in later Sanskrit literature. Although it is difficult to date these lexicons, they may have been written around the 5th century Common Era. This is just a guess. Among these, Vyadi was either a Buddhist himself or he was influenced by Buddhism. Hemachandra, the 11th century Jain lexicographer, while commenting on Buddha's epithets, Dashabhumiga, Chatustrimshat Jatakajna, and Dashaparamita cites three long passages from Vadi's hitherto lost lexicon Utpalini. Next. So these are the three passages. The first one is found in the commentary on Dashabhumiga. It provides a well-known and well-attested list of 10 bhumis mastered by the Buddha. The list occurs in texts such as Dashabhumika Sutra, Sutra Lankara, Abhidharma Samuchaya, Abhisamaya Lankara, and Panchamimshati Sahasrika Prajna Paramita. The second passage from Vyadi, which is interesting for our purpose, is on the word Chatushchatvarimshat Jatakajna, the one who knows 34 previous births. It includes a list of 26 Jatakas, not 34 actually, but 26. So these are stories of Buddha's former births as a Bodhisattva. So some of the Jatakas, number 14, 15, Kalmashaha and Pindi Jatakam, actually they form one Jataka, and the next Adhimuhyam and Shreshthi Jatam, they form one Jataka. So out of these, 25 have their clear correspondence in Arya Shura's Jatakamala, the first Sanskrit text which has 34 stories of Buddha's previous births. The last one, the Kunthu Jataka, is without any parallel. I could not reconstruct his name or what it corresponds to in Arya Shura Jatakamala. The word Eva Madayaha and so on at the end of the last verse may well take care of the remaining Jatakas. Next. The third passage occurs in the commentary on the word Dashaparamita, the one who has obtained 10 paramitas. Here, Hemachandra seems to have been misled by the words Prajna and Paramita. If you see the verse, it clearly mentions Jina Shaktayaha. So, it is not mentioning actually 10 perfections, but it is mentioning Jina Shakti, 10 powers of Jina, and not 10 paramitas. Tara, Prajna Paramita, Marichi, and Vajrakali are well-known deities in Buddhist literature, but I could not find Vrunda, Chatudurvasa, I don't know whether Chatudurvasa is a correct reading or we expect something different reading. But even with Durvasa, I couldn't find anything. And Maricha also I could not find. Marichi is certainly there. Now coming to the date, Vadi's date, Phule, who wrote a small book on Indian lexicography, he mentions that, and I quote, his references in fragment 6 to the Shakti Tara, the female counterpart of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, whose cult was introduced about the 6th century, is a valuable clue as to its terminus apo. Thus, Vadi seems to be a predecessor of Amarasimha, the author of the Amarakosha, to whom we will turn in a minute. This is further substantiated by the fact that Amara commentators have mentioned Vadi as Amarasimha's one of Amarasimha's sources. So now we come to next. So now we come to Amarasimha's Namalinganu Shasana, which is popularly known as Amarakosha. Most modern scholars believe that Amarasimha was a Buddhist by faith. The benedictory verse, even if it does not mention the word Buddha or any epithet of the Buddha, certainly points to the Buddha, because we have the two words Jnana, wisdom, and Daya, compassion. Then Amarasimha places epithets of the Buddha before the principal Brahmanical deities, namely Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. This prominent position given to the Buddha supports the assumption that he was a Buddhist. Amarasimha was a Buddhist. Then the third proof is, while listing words related to trees, synonyms of the Bodhi tree under which Buddha attained enlightenment are mentioned first, and even among them, the synonym Bodhidruma is the first one. These are these three facts you will find in any work on Sanskrit lexicography or any work related to Amarasingha. But there are few words which are typically Buddhist and which Amarasingha has noted in his lexicon. This is not a complete list, but few words which I have come across. So these include Drava, Uttarasanga, Abhidhya, Gandharva, Asrava, Adinava. And interestingly, even though Amarasingha does not speak about his sources, he just says that other treatises. We don't know which other treatises he referred to, but at least one uh, hemistich, Abhidhya to Parasva Vishama Spruha, which is a definition of Abhidhya, covetousness, seems to be taken over directly from Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha. And we should remember here that Situ Panchen, who translated Amarakosha in Tibetan, he says that Amarasingha was a scholar of Abhidharma. Yeah, next. Then there are three Buddhist lexicographers. Ajayapala, his text is Nanartha Sangraha. Then Purushottama Deva, author of the Trikanda Shesha, and Maheshwara in his Vishwa Prakasha. All these three, they pay homage to the Buddha. In addition, there are Buddhist words included in all the three lexicographers. So you can see them. I have displayed them on the screen. Yeah, next. Purushottama Deva and then Maheshwara. Yeah, next. Yeah, next. Okay, yeah. So these are the words which are Buddhist in nature. And I mean, we might come, these words are also recorded by successive lexicographers. But what was important is we first find them in Amarakosha, and then later lexicographers have copied them in a way in their lexicons. So we can say that they were influenced by Amarasingha. Yeah, next. Crossing Indian borders, when we look into lexicographical activities in the neighboring Buddhist countries, we see a different picture. In 12th century, Nava or Chula Moggallana, late 12th century, that's his period, a resident of the Mahajetavana Vihara, composed the first Pali lexicon, Abhidhanappa Deepika, and the second one is Ekakkara Kosa, written in 15th century by Burmese monk named Saddhamma Kitti. Chulamoggallana states that he wrote this lexicon specifically for those who wish to read the words of the Buddha. So he says that the lexicons which were written before him, Sanskrit lexicons, which are not sufficient to understand Buddha's words, and hence he has undertaken this task of writing a new Pali lexicon. So he adopted the structure of the Amarakosha and adapted its contents to suit his purpose, which was to prepare a lexicon which will help in understanding the words of the Buddha. Then he starts his lexicon in keeping with the Buddhist tradition by paying homage to the triple gem. Then he mentions the sources of his lexicon. So Pali Buddhist scriptures form an important source of his lexicon, which is in the, I have displayed it on the screen. With regard to a lot of usages found in the Buddhist scriptures, that is Tipitaka, sometimes nouns and genders are taught by adopting the method of lexicons, that is Nighantu. Next. Chula makes it a point to include as many synonyms or epithets which are attested in Buddhist literature as possible. This can be seen from the point of addition of either synonyms or epithets of that particular semantic category. Increase in the epithets of the Buddha is an example of the first case. In Amarakosha, there are 18 epithets of the Buddha, whereas in Abhidhanapadipika, the number has gone up to 32. And these are mostly attested in the Pali literature. Then inclusion of a list of 7 mountains around Mount Meru. These are which are found in the Pali literature can be seen as an example of the second type. So this category of 7 mountains is altogether missing in the Amarkosha, and Chula Moggallana makes it a point to include it because it is attested in Pali literature. Then the epithets of Arhat were missing in Amarkosha. Chula Moggallana includes them in his lexicon. Next. Then, in order to make his lexicon more acceptable to his Buddhist readers, Chula Moggallana either cuts down the number of epithets of Brahmanical gods or omits a category that specifically belongs to Brahmanical religion. For instance, Amarasingha recorded 39 epithets of Vishnu, the first among the Hindu trinity. Chula Moggallana listed only 5 and he omitted the rest. Similarly, he did not include epithets of Vasudeva, Krishna's father, Krishna's brother Balarama, Ganadevatas, deities which occur in masses, and so on. Another interesting example is the word Lakshmi. In Amarkosha, this word occurs as Vishnu's wife and also in the sense of prosperity. Chula Moggallana omitted the former meaning, Vishnu's wife. That was not very suitable, or maybe it doesn't occur in Pali literature, and retained the latter. Next. Then he made certain alterations in the Amarkosha. So one can see the placement of epithets of the Buddha as the example of these alterations. As I said before, in Amarkosh, the epithets of Buddha occur before the principal Brahmanical deities, but after the synonyms of heaven, gods, and demons, etc. Chula Moggallana changed this order, so his lexicon begins with the epithet of the Buddha, then those of the Shakyamuni Buddha, then Nirvana. So Nirvana in Amarkosh is listed in the 5th chapter, which deals with intellect. Chula Moggallana brought it immediately after Shakyamuni Buddha so that it is consistent from Buddhist point of view. So this change in the position of Buddha's epithets certainly highlights the importance of this category in Abhidhanapadipika. Similarly, for liberation also we can say the same thing. Then there is one more interesting example. Another way to make alterations is changing the connotation of a particular semantic category. For instance, Chula Moggallana listed 5 epithets of Mara, first in the Brahmanical context and later in the Buddhist context. So these epithets include Antaka, Papima, Kanna, and Pajapati. This is never associated in Buddhist literature with Kamadeva, Cupid. Similarly, so this Kamadeva occurs in Brahmanical tradition. Similarly, Kamadeva's epithets such as Pradyumna, Ratipati, and Shambharari do not suit the Buddhist Mara. Hence, while bringing the Buddhist and the Brahmanical connotations together, Chula Moggallana chose only those epithets from Amarkosha which are not contrary to the Buddhist notion of Mara. Next. Now we shift to Tibet. As many of us know, the translation activity which started in Tibet in 7th or 8th century, it needed coining of Tibetan vocabulary for Sanskrit terms. For this, a central committee of translators and Indian and Tibetan scholars was constituted. In order to revise these translations or to standardize the new ones and bring uniformity in terminology and translation techniques, this central committee composed Mahavyutpatti, the first bilingual Sanskrit-Tibetan dictionary. Obviously, the focus of this dictionary was on Buddhist vocabulary. The versified format, which is common in Sanskrit and Pali lexicons, is certainly not suitable for writing a bilingual dictionary. That might be the reason why Tibetan scholars chose a prose format for their dictionary. Except the Tibetan translations of the Amarkosh, most of the Sanskrit Tibetan lexicons are written in prose. Next. So, in Mahavyutpatti, if we compare Mahavyutpatti with traditional Sanskrit dictionaries, what we find is that the Sanskrit dictionaries are arranged according to the sections related to heaven, the earth, and miscellanea. The Mahavyutpatti is divided into several chapters that deal with various semantic categories such as epithets of the Buddha, names of the former Buddhas, names of various qualities and states associated with the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, epithets of Bodhisattva, Pratyeka Buddhas, the disciples of the Buddha, and things associated with them. Thus, out of 283 chapters that include 9,565 entry words, more than half are related to Buddhist terminology. Next. The remaining chapters include non-Buddhist philosophical terms belonging to 6 Indian schools of philosophy that occur in Buddhist texts, names of important personalities belonging to the Indian culture, such as names of the 5 sons of King Pandu, which occur in the Mahabharata, and names of important non-Buddhist teachers, etc. And then there is also secular vocabulary, which includes names of various dwelling places and localities, chariots, parts of chariots, cereals, types of food, vegetables, medicinal plants, clothes, colors, etc. Next. Next is the latest and the biggest bilingual Sanskrit Tibetan dictionary, Keni Shenger Rapsal Norbui Melong, composed by Mifam Rinpoche in the 20th century, 19th, 20th century. So this is a time when, in fact, the translation activity had already stopped long back. So Mifam Rinpoche, as far as I know, he has not mentioned his motive. It seems that he did it for scholarly reasons, or he took it up as a scholarly activity in order to continue the tradition of writing Sanskrit Tibetan dictionaries. The arrangement of his lexicon is also like the Mahavyutpatti. So words are arranged subject wise. For instance, lexicon begins with the epithets of the Buddha, followed by names of Pratyeka Buddhas and former Buddhas, qualities of the Buddha, names of various concentrations, synonyms of Bodhisattvas, names of individual Bodhisattvas, etc. And in addition to this, Mifam Rinpoche has also included secular vocabulary and also non-Buddhist philosophical terms, and many of these are taken over from either Mahavyutpatti or from Amarkosha, and also from Vyakhya Sudha, a commentary on the Amarkosha. Next. Yeah, now we come to Subhuti Chandra. the commentarial literature. So Buddhist commentators, among the commentarial literature of Amarakosh, Kavikamadhenu commentary, which was written between 1115 and 1130 on the Amarkosh, which was written by Buddhist monk scholar Subhuti Chandra, it holds an important place. Subhuti Chandra belonged to the Vikramshil monastery and he was one of the members of the translation committee for the Arya Saddharma Smriti Upasthana Sutra. Subhuti Chandra is the only Buddhist commentator on the Amarkosha. At the same time, he is the only author who has used Chandra grammatical tradition as the basis of deriving words of the Amarkosh. Here we should remember that although we have Buddhist writing commentaries on Buddhist texts, for instance, Tattva Sangraha and Tattva Sangraha Panjika, or Abhidharma Kosha and Abhidharma Kosha Bhashya, no commentator has used Chandra grammatical tradition. Using Chandra tradition is important from a religious affiliation point of view because Chandra and Katantra grammars were written by Buddhists and they were popular among Buddhists, whereas Panini's was not a Buddhist. Although Tibetan tradition does say that he was Buddhist, we don't have any proof of saying that he was Buddhist. So Subhuti Chandra is the only one who made Chandra tradition as his basis. So that is his unique contribution. Then he cites many passages from at least 27 known or unknown Buddhist texts. Most of the times, these citations found their way into later commentary literature on Amarkosha. While commenting on the epithets of the Buddha, Subhuti Chandra also made use of citations from anonymous Buddhist texts. Then he also quoted non-Buddhist texts or secular texts, so to say, composed by Buddhist authors. For instance, the Chandas Shastra of Acharya Ratnakara Shanti and Nagara Sarvasva written by the monk scholar Padma Shri. So there are at least 887 citations. Next. Sorry, the list is, a little bit distorted. But this is the list. Sorry. Of Buddhist texts from which Subhuti Chandra quotes. Next. Next, we go to Burma. The Abhidhanapa Deepika, the text which was written in Sri Lanka, was commented upon at least 8 times. And out of these, the Abhidhanapa Deepika Tika was written by Burmese minister Chaturanga Bala around 1351 Common Era. This commentary is interesting as at many places it simply takes over materials from Subhuti Chandra's Kavikamadhenu and translates it into Pali. The nature of this commentary is inclusive in nature. We have seen before that Chula Moggallana was very much aware of his Buddhist audience and hence he tried to limit the non-Buddhist or rather Brahmanical vocabulary as far as possible. It seems that Chaturanga Bala wanted to make his commentary as inclusive as possible. As a result, he included most of these excluded synonyms from the Amarkosh and even some of the omitted semantic categories in his commentary. The sources of such additions is Amarkosha, its commentary literature, and Purushottama Deva's Trikanda Shesha. Next. Now let us see whether Chaturanga Bala's Buddhist affiliation played any role in the selection of citations. In his commentary, there are 222 citations from various literary works. These citations do not include, this number does not include citations from grammatical and lexicographical literature. So these 222 citations include 77 citations from the Pali canonical and extra-canonical literature. Literary genres from which the remaining citations are taken are dramaturgy, Puranas, plays, epics, polity, philosophical literature, medicine, astronomy, and Shiksha literature. So out of these remaining 145 citations, almost half, that is 73, are direct borrowings from the Kavikamadhenu. It remains to be checked whether the remaining ones can be traced back to any other Amarakosha commentaries. Next. Then we go to the latest commentator, the latest Buddhist commentator, Srila Skandha Yativara or Srila Skandha Mahathera from Sri Lanka. In 1915, Srila Skandha Mahathera's commentary on Purushottama Deva's Trikanda Shesha was published from India. He writes that there was no commentary written on this important kosher, and that's why he decided to write a commentary himself. So, Srila Skandha being a Buddhist monk, we have certain expectations from him. First thing is, he should explain the Buddhist vocabulary in a Buddhist way or in a manner which is suitable to Buddhists. Unfortunately, this is not the case. When he commented upon the word Munindra, chief among sages, which is an epithet of the Buddha, he first remarks that Buddha is the chief of Pratyeka Buddhas who are devoid of attachment, or he is the chief of 7 Arya Ganas such as Sotapanna, etc., whose minds are pure. This is fine. This is certainly unique to Srila Skandha because we do not find any parallel for this explanation in the Sanskrit lexicographical tradition. But afterwards, while he is listing the qualities of a sage, he cites a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Dukkheshu anudvigna manaha sukheshu vigata spruha vitaraga bhayak krodha sthiradhir muniruchyate. And then he cites further comments, or the one who is the king or the ruler of the 7 sages, such as Manu, Atri, Vishnu, Harita, etc., who are firm minded. Here, the word Munindra denotes the Buddha as is taught by the Amarakosha, Munindra Shri Ghana Shasta. If we see Amara commentaries, including Subhuti Chandra, his Kavikamadhenu, they have a very brief comment on the word Munindra, or rather, it's a grammatical derivation. But Subhuti Chandra, when he derives the word Muni, he says that since he, that is Buddha, has reflected upon all the phenomena in every way, or he has kept silence regarding the instruction of righteousness, he is called Muni. So it is possible that when Subhuti Chandra commented upon Munindra, he had these sages in his mind. In any case, citing names of composers of Smritis when the word clearly refers to the Buddha certainly does not help a reader in understanding how Buddha is chief among them. So Smritis are basically code for it is applicable in it was applicable in day-to-day lives, and it governed Indian life to a large extent, and teachings or whatever was written in Smritis, I think it is quite contradictory to what Buddha taught, and hence I think it was not really correct on part of Srila Skanda to quote these 7 sages. Next. Then Srila Skanda has not explained the epithets like Panchajnana or Dashabhumisha. What we were expecting, or what one expects from he is he should list the 5 knowledges or 10 bhumis. He did not do that. Then there are wrong interpretations. For instance, Purushottama Deva listed epithets of tantric goddesses. Shilaskandha did not comment on any of them, but he said that these seven are names or epithets of Maya Devi. And these are like Vajravarahi, Marichi, etc. And these are tantric deities. Nowhere we come across them, at least I do not know, that they are used as epithets of Maya Devi, Buddha's mother. Even after considering these limitations of the commentator Shilaskanda, one must also realize that it is not easy to comment on a lexicon, especially when the lexicographer includes such synonyms which are not attested in the literature. The case in point is Gopesha, which Purushottama Deva has listed as an epithet of the Buddha. The commentator is left with no other choice than to explain it as Gopesha is the lord or master of cowherds of Gokula. Now, this Gopesha from Shilaskanda's comment appears to be an epithet of Krishna, not of the Buddha. That is first thing. I tried to search this word using modern search engines, but I was unable to find it in the sense of Buddha. One thing which my husband suggested, Professor Mahesh, is in Lalita Vistara, we come across Gopa as another title of Yashodhara, wife of Siddhartha Gautama. So it is possible that Purushottama Deva used the epithet Gopesha for the Buddha in the sense of lord or husband of Gopa, that is Yashodhara. Then, as far as citations are concerned, at some places, Shilaskanda does provide citations from Amarakosha or other lexicons and from Bhatti or a certain Jayadeva, but the number of such passages are extremely low, and he does not provide any dialectal or words, or he does not supplement the Amarakosha. Next. Sorry, it's again. Yeah, now we come to lexicographical treatises. That question mark is purposeful. Purposefully, I have added this. Up till now, we took an overview of the traditional Sanskrit or Pali or Tibetan lexicons which were composed by Buddhist lexicographers. Now we turn to two Sanskrit texts which are important from the lexicographical point of view. The first one is the Artha Vinishchaya Sutra, gathering the meanings or analysis of topics. And the second one is Nagarjuna Dharma Sangraha. It is attributed to Nagarjuna. So, Artha Vinishya Sutra is a compendium of important categories frequently mentioned in Buddhist texts. The word Artha means category, whereas the word Vinishchaya means examination or analysis. After enumerating 27 topics at the beginning, the sutra goes on to provide list of 5 aggregates or aggregates that are objects of clinging, etc. Next. Then we have Dharma Sangraha, which is attributed to Nagarjuna. According to Ananda Jyoti Bhikkhu, who translated this text into English, the text as it stands was collected or at least finalized sometime after the rise of Mahayana texts, as for instance the 3 vehicles including the Mahayana, Bodhisattvas from that tradition, and the 5 Dhyani Buddhas are listed, and important Mahayana categories like Shunyata are emphasized. The text is attributed to Nagarjuna at the conclusion, and although this attribution seems unlikely, the text does seem to have been influenced by Nagarjuna's thought, and the attribution may be taken as indicating the school to which it belongs. The text brings together important Buddhist terms at one place and hence can be treated as a Buddhist lexicon. Then we go to the second aspect of my presentation, that is theoretical lexicography. So how did Buddhists document meanings? So first is synonyms of nouns, and we go through the canonical literature very briefly. If we glance through Pali canonical literature, one striking feature immediately catches our attention. This is the profuse use of synonymous strings, or as Dhadphale, our teacher, who was very much interested in Pali lexicography, has called them synonymic collocations. Using synonyms in a continuous string is the easiest way to record words and their meanings. And now we have the first string on the screen for gold. This is uttered by the Buddha, this verse. It comes in the context of Uposatha, and Buddha is explaining the importance of Uposatha. So such verses, there are many of them, certainly carry the flavor of a versified synonymic lexicon. And if reference to canonical text is not given, one is likely to mistake such verses for those from some synonymous lexicon. And I have given a parallel verse from Abhidhanapa Deepika, and you can compare that indeed the verse from the Anguttara Nikaya appears to be from some lost lexicon. Okay, next. Such verses listing synonyms or homonyms of a particular word are also found in the commentarial literature. On the screen, you can see the verse which lists meanings of the word samaya, time. The verse is found in Buddhaghosa's commentary on the Digha Nikaya. It provides various meanings of the word samaya. There is another version of the word which is found in the commentary on the Dhammasangani. So the word samaya is seen in the sense of combination, a short moment, time, multitude, cause, view, obtaining, giving up, and penetration. And just for a comparison, for the sake of comparison, I have also given the verse from Abhidhana Padipika, a real lexicon. The next. Then another text is Aggamamsa Sadaniti. Aggamamsa is a Burmese grammarian. His text is Sadaniti. It's a grammatical text, but this is also full of verses which list synonyms and homonyms. Here it's his comment on the word evam, thus or in this way. I was unable to find any parallel in Abhidhana Padipika or any other Sanskrit lexicon. Maybe there is still some chance to go through the canonical literature or Atthakatha literature to find parallels for Saddhaniti. Yeah, next. Then Buddha, when he used synonyms of nouns, he also used synonyms of verbs. And the example is there: Achikhanti, Desenti, Panyapenti, Patthapenti, Vivaranti, Vibhajanti, Uttani Karonti. So meanings are already there. I have listed them: to tell, to preach, to point out, to set forth, to reveal, to explain in detail, to make known. So they are somewhat similar. There are subtle differences, but still it brings together all the words which mean on a gross level same thing. Then if we see the Mahanidesa, which is a canonical text, but its nature is that of a commentary, it gathers together words which mean the one who is desiring. So there we find Kamaya Manasa is paraphrased as Ichha Manasa, Sadiya Manasa, Pathaya Manasa, Pihaya Manasa, and Abhijappa Manasa. Then Dhammasangani, it lists figurative expressions. For instance, Panya, which means wisdom, is glossed with wisdom as sword, wisdom as height, wisdom as light, wisdom as glory, wisdom as splendor, wisdom as a precious stone. So this tendency to use synonymic exegesis is also visible in the later canonical works and early commentary literature. Next. Then there are two texts which are important for our purpose. One is Petakopadesa and the second one is Netipakarana. So they use synonyms as one of the methods of conveying the exact sense of a canonical expression. And while doing so, they end up collecting all the synonyms of a particular concept. For instance, on the screen you can see verses from Samyutta Nikaya. All these are synonyms of Nibbana, liberation. And these are further collected in Netipakarana. So the number has certainly gone up from Samyutta Nikaya to Netipakarana. And sometimes the number of synonyms found in Petakopadesa or Netipakarana is certainly larger than the one found in the Abhidhanapadipika. So Abhidhanapadipika has certainly here listed less number of synonyms than we find in the Netipakarana and Petakopadesa. Next. Yeah, this is Abhidhanapadipika, which has less number of synonyms. Next. Yeah. Then we come to Buddhaghosa, the most celebrated commentator on the Pali canonical literature. His commentaries are again full of lexicographical discussions. He has defined 3 modes of synonymy. One is adhivachana, second is nirutti, and the third is panyatti. According to him, adhivachana is a synonym which uses different synonyms to explain a particular word. For instance, luck bringing is explained as wealth bringing. So luck is replaced by wealth. Then the second mode is nirutti, a mode of explanation where the derivation of a word is given as the cause of its use. For instance, sankharas, compounded phenomena, are so called because they compound what is compounded. And the third is panyatti, alternative expression, where the same idea is described in different ways by means of alternative expressions. For instance, thought is explained by 3 alternative expressions, takka, vitakka, and sankappa. Yeah, next. In Attasalini, Buddhaghosa points out 2 main functions of synonymic collocations, that is, strings of synonyms, to meet the needs of persons of different calibers and as an embellishment of the discourse. So while explaining the reason behind the existence of 5 different suttas, almost same, but for the difference in their synonymous titles, namely Abha Sutta, Pabha Sutta, Aloka Sutta, Obhasa Sutta, and Pajyota Sutta. So the word Abha is replaced by Pabha or Aloka, all mean light. Buddhaghosa says, it is true that the sense could have been conveyed by any of them singly. However, all of them are used with a view to meeting the inclinations of various persons. The meaning, when diversified, becomes well specified as the persons of different caliber can understand them in their own way. Next. Then Mahanidyasa Atthakatha explains threefold phenomena of synonymy. So synonyms are divided on account of letters, on account of prefixes, and on account of their meaning. For instance, the word piti, emotion of joy, and pamoja, delight, are divided on account of letters. So the letters or consonants are different, and on account of that, they are synonyms. Then prefixes, synonyms divided on account of prefixes. For instance, amodana, delighting, and pamodana, delight. Here there are 2 prefixes, one is a and second is p in Pali. And then synonyms are divided on account of their meaning. For instance, odagya, elation, and attamanata, satisfaction, are synonymous due to the difference in meaning. Again, Mahanidyasa classifies synonyms on the basis of manifoldness of meaning, characteristic, performance, and negation. Such kind of classification of synonyms is indeed very unique in the Pali lexicographical literature. Thus, in the case of Pali literature, the need of a lexicon was satisfied by its rich exegetical literature to a great extent. Even when a lexicon like Abhidhanapadipika was composed, scholars primarily relied on this exegetical literature for the explanation of primary texts. Next. The last example, old words, new interpretations. Another way to approach words is to change their connotation to suit one's purpose. The word Tevijya, Sanskrit Traividya, is a good example of this. The word occurs in the Brahmanical literature in the sense one who is well versed in the three Vedas. Buddha used it with a different meaning. The Saratha Pakasini commentary explains Tevijya as Tevijjati Pubbe Nivasa Dibba Chakku Asavakhaya Sankhatahi Tihi Vijjahi Samannagata. Knowledge of former births, of the future births of beings, and of the destruction of the depravities. One who has this knowledge is called Tevijja. Yeah, next. So, whether Buddhists did conventional lexicography or not, the Pali Buddhists. In Pali, there is one word which occurs really very frequently is Nighandu. We already saw the characteristics of the Vedic Nighandu at the beginning of the lecture. In Pali, the word is Nighandu, a collection of words or a treatise on lexicography. It occurs in the context of listing accomplishments of a learned Brahmin. Almost all the commentators of the Pali canon explain the word Nighandu in the same way. A collection of nouns, the science of explaining the synonyms of words beginning with rukha, tree, and so on. This indicates that there certainly was, or these commentators were certainly aware of some lexicon starting with a list of synonyms of tree beginning with the word rukha. However, not a single Pali Nighandu has come down to us. Interestingly, such a list is found in Aggavansa Saddhaniti. So it begins with rukha. And another point which is interesting is Amarakosha's list of synonyms of trees also begins with vruksha, which is Sanskrit equivalent of rukha. I won't go into details of this verse from Amarakosha, but to conclude, it will be clear that the Pali literature is full of lexicographical discussions, and the tradition was very much alive even after the parinibbana of the Buddha, and hence, most probably, there never arose the need of a Pali lexicon. And then we come to conclusion. As far as Indian Buddhist next, sorry, as far as Indian Buddhist lexicographers are concerned, they still did secular lexicography and therefore they restricted themselves to paying homage to the Buddha and to including a number of words which are used in Buddhist literature. Although there is no clear attempt on their part to prepare a Buddhist lexicon, still they seem to have given more representation to Buddhist vocabulary as compared to their non-Buddhist counterparts. Abhidhana Paripika, Mahavyutpatti, and Mifam Rinpoche's dictionary were compiled with two different motives. Chulamoggallana modeled his lexicon on the Amarkosha and adopted its structure. His motive was to prepare a lexicon to help Buddhist readers in understanding the words of the Buddha. In order to achieve this, he included additional Buddhist vocabulary and excluded or reduced the Brahmanical ones. At the same time, his alterations in the arrangement of his lexicon is a clear testimony of his attempt to write a Buddhist lexicon. The two Tibetan dictionaries, especially the Mahavyutpatti, were compiled in order to help translators in translating Buddhist Sanskrit texts into Tibetan. These two certainly showed the path to write typically Buddhist lexicons. Their motives themselves must have led to their non-adherence to the traditional arrangement of vocabulary as found in Sanskrit lexicons. Whereas Chulamoggallana tried to delimit the non-Buddhist vocabulary by including only those words which were in vogue in his time, the compilers of the Tibetan dictionaries included secular vocabulary that was found in Buddhist texts. Next. Subhuti Chandra brought Buddhist texts into the mainstream Sanskrit lexicographical discussions by citing Buddhist texts. Although Chaturanga Bala translated a major portion of Subhuti Chandra's Kavikamadhenu in Pali, he certainly gets the credit for including 77 passages from Pali canonical literature and extra-canonical literature in Pali lexicographical discussion. In case of Shilaskandha, it appears that scanty knowledge of cultural elements of India as well as that of Mahayana Buddhism, particularly the Vajrayana, on part of him are the main reasons for such misleading explanations. Arthavinishya Sutra and Dharma Sangraha certainly provide us with examples of how a Buddhist lexicon might have looked like. As far as Pali canonical and commentary literature is concerned, it is full of lexicographical discussions, recording synonymous strings of a word or a verb, defining modes and functions of synonymy, and redefining extant vocabulary. Although the early Vedic tradition does show awareness of the definition of synonymy and homonymy, such a fine lexicographical discussion is missing in that tradition. The Buddha had always given preference to refuge in meaning over refuge in letters. Following him, Buddhists dealt with all possible relationships between words and their meanings, either by following the lexicographical norms that were current in their times, or by breaking them to suit their purpose, or by resorting to theoretical discussions. Whatever they chose to do, they never did away with lexicography. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lata. This is a very, very interesting lecture and very broad in scope. I learned a lot myself. So far, I have not received any questions. So while maybe we wait for some other questions to come in,
Yeah.
I can take advantage of the situation and ask some of my own questions.
Yeah.
So the first questions are somewhat brief, and they have to do with just some choices of words or readings.
Yeah.
And the first question I have is about one of the passages that you cited from the Chatuschatvarimshat Jatakadnya,
Yeah.
where there is a list of Jatakas.
Yes.
And the first one, if I remember correctly, is Vyagri. And the
Yes.
second one, which is cited, is Shitihi. So
Yeah.
my thought was, couldn't Shitihi simply be a corruption for Shibi? Since
Yeah,
that is, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. I just had access to Hemachandra's commentary because in Hemachandra's commentary we have this list, and I don't have access to his commentary's manuscripts.
Okay. And
So
yeah, the order suggests it could be Shibi, right?
yeah, order is also different from the order as found in Arya Shurya Jatakamala, but that might be for metrical reasons.
Right. So that was a very small thing. Another one was the verse where there were the Jina Shaktis, which starts with Pratnya, Paramita, then I forgot if it is Vrinda or Tara. But my question, Vrinda. So my question is about the first two words. I wonder why they're not represented as a samasa, since Pratnya Paramita is normally a Devi, and it would seem somewhat natural to me, at least, to take Pratnya Paramita, Vrinda, etc.
That's true. That's true. No, in this case, again, I followed the edition. I did not suggest anything. I just followed the edition. I think there is one edition of his commentary.
Okay,
And maybe
thank
the commentator was really not, sorry, not the commentator. The editor was not really aware of what does this mean. That is possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Another very minor question is about when you present the list of Buddhist words in the Amarakosha, one of the words you presented is ashrava. So I was wondering whether that was intentional, because earlier I think that when you quoted a verse where it appears, it was, I think, adina vasravau kleshe. So it was sakara.
Yeah, that was in Amarakosha.
So, but in the second instance, you quoted it as ashrava with the
That was my mistake.
shakara.
That was my
Okay, thank you. And another similar doubt, but I think the way you read it was different from the way it was written. So I was just wondering, what you read made better sense to me than what was written there. Shrauta.
Ah, this is again from the edition itself.
Okay, but you read it as Shrota, so you would agree that that is what we
Yes,
would
yes,
expect, right?
yes. But I think Shrota Panna yesterday I tried to find, but I couldn't find anything like Shrota Panna. So yeah, I mean editions of all these lexicographical treatises is really a problem. So you cannot 100% trust them. And if you don't have access to manuscripts, you just have to write whatever is there and make some corrections in footnote or parenthesis. There is no way. But it is
Okay.
indeed Shrota in the text.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, okay. We do have one question from the audience. Let me just read it out to you. It's a relatively long question. Do I understand it right that we should be very careful when we deal with lexicography of different Indian philosophical traditions, to the extent that a person reading Buddhist texts can entirely ignore lexicographies of other traditions? That is clearly so in case of specific terms. What about more general terms? To which terms this distinction applies? So maybe if we want to sum up this question, I think the main point is how specified lexicography is and how aware we should be of this specificity when we read lexicographers and lexical texts belonging to different traditions. I think more or less this is the main point.
I mean, for reading Buddhist texts, I think these lexicographers are not of much use. One limitation of traditional lexicons is we just get synonyms, but we don't get definitions. Even with Artha Vinishya Sutra or Dharma Sangraha, there are no definitions. Or even with Tibetan, Madhyavyutpatti or the Dajor Bampo Nipa can guide us how they arrived at that particular translation. But to know the context or everything, I think actual text or the commentarial tradition of the text will certainly help. Because, I mean, even with Amarakosha, all the words which I have listed, if the commentator is not a Buddhist, how would we know that the word was used in the Buddhist context? For instance, the word drava, right? I was wondering when I first read that word, drava, but it occurs in Vinaya literature. Okay. But if the commentator does not know that the word occurs in Vinaya literature, he won't quote those passages. The word is kind of secular. So one has to be really cautious because by the time these koshas were written and commented upon, the Buddhist tradition was slowly on decline. So whatever the tradition took, it is basically from Subhuti Chandra. So one must be really cautious while using these traditional dictionaries. That's what I feel.
Thank you. There is another question from the audience.
Yeah.
And do you think there could be any other reason for Subhuti Chandra to cite Chandra, apart from the fact that it's from a Buddhist author?
No, I don't think there is any reason. I think he was really keen on how to say displaying or whatever, confirming his Buddhist identity again and again. Because his benedictory verses are to Buddha and they are very complicated verses. Unfortunately, they are only in Tibetan, but they are very complicated. Then the benedictory verses of his another text, Subhanta Ratnakara, are also for the Buddha. before Subhuti Chandra, we don't see anyone quoting Buddhist literature. And it's not the case that Subhuti Chandra was not well versed in the Paninian tradition. He was a really good grammarian. He knew Panini, Chandra, Katantra, the entire tradition. Not only Ashtadhyayi, not only Chandra grammar, not only Katantra grammar, but their commentarial tradition also he knew very well. Not only that, he also knew Prakrut grammar. At least he quotes from Hevara's commentary on Vararucha, what is that? Vararucha grammar. Then he also quotes from Purushottama Deva's Prakrut grammar. So it is not out of his ignorance of Panini's grammar, but rather his Buddhist identity. That's what I feel. It's not
Sorry.
it's not the case that you cannot derive those words using Panini. You can derive all the words using Panini, like the rest of the commentators have done.
I do have a follow-up question on this, though. I'm not sure about the case of Subhuti Chandra specifically, but him being a Vikramashila master, he would probably have regarded the Tantras as being authoritative. And the idea that Panini is a Buddhist is expressed in the Tantras, specifically in the Manjushri Mula Kalpa. So from that perspective, it is at least likely that for Subhuti Chandra too, Panini was a Buddhist. So wouldn't that somewhat undermine the rationale that he chose Chandra because Chandra is Buddhist, but Panini is not Buddhist?
I think so, but I mean, coming to this tantric tradition, I'm not very sure, but it is possible that Subhuti Chandra wrote two texts on Tantra. I think one is Heruka tradition and one is Hevajra. I'm not very sure. I'm still exploring all these possibilities. But yeah, this aspect would be, I didn't think about this Panini being Buddhist, and that I didn't think about.
Okay, I see. Well, there's no other question now from the audience, so maybe I can ask another question. Regarding Mipa Rinpoche, you were discussing the possible motives of Mipa Rinpoche writing Sanskrit-Tibetan lexicon. I wonder whether you think it could have something to do with the Rime project, because this comes to mind because we can see that the Rime masters all had great interest in Indian texts and in different ways all engaged with Sanskrit. For example, Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche used to teach Sanskrit grammar very, very frequently, according to his own autobiography. And Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo composed a number of Sanskrit verses. So it seems that they made really a significant effort too. It's not just Mipa Rinpoche. So do you think it could be linked to that, to this Rime project?
Yes, then yeah, I didn't know this aspect. Yeah, then it is possible. Because at least the beginning of his lexicon doesn't mention anything. It's just like homage to the triple gem, and straightway the dictionary starts without mentioning anything. Because normally in Sanskrit lexicons, the motive or intentions are mentioned in the beginning of the text. So that could be one reason. Because I was really wondering, I mean, given his lifetime and dates, why would someone write, and it's a really huge dictionary, really huge. Why would someone do that in 19th or 20th century? So yeah, thanks for this. I didn't know. Yeah.
Oh, well, I could add, we also have two other more recent cases of interest in Sanskrit on the part of Tibetan scholars that I'm sure you know very well. One is Gendun Chöpel, and the other one is Kunu Lama. Both of them made a significant effort, I think, to study Sanskrit, maybe for similar purposes.
Purposes. Yeah. Yeah, but with the zeal with which they worked is really amazing. I mean, even with Situ Rinpoche or whatever they did, they consulted so many commentaries, so many manuscripts, and they collected everything, and then only they wrote. When Situ Panchan translated Kavi Kamadhenu into Tibetan, it's not only that he studied Kavi Kamadhenu, but he also gathered manuscripts of other commentaries and he consulted them and then he translated. So that is very amazing that during that period, 18th century or something like that, they did so many efforts.
I have another question which brings us back to the general thinking about lexicography in Buddhist texts. And I have some memory that as an example of the Nirukti Pratisamvid, this special knowledge of Nirukti, maybe the Abhidharma Samuccaya Bhashya gives Rupyate iti Rupam. So, do you think that there is a connection between this idea of Nirukti Pratisamvid and lexicographical thinking?
Yeah. There is certainly, all these etymologies or niruktis are certainly there. And I think in Pali and also in Sanskrit, we do have all these discussions taking place. So nirukti or nirukti in Sanskrit, these are very much common. So I see all these as theoretical lexicography kind of thing where they are discussing all these possibilities, how to provide derivations, because that's one of the major functions of commentaries, right? They give grammatical derivation, and maybe these kinds of derivations are interesting because they are kind of rooted in the actual tradition, not far-fetched derivations which we find in Amarkosha commentaries that the verb is doesn't exist or the verb is coined and it doesn't ultimately lead us anywhere. So maybe I think these Abhidharma commentaries or Abhidhamma commentaries in Pali and Sanskrit might be more useful.
There's another question from the audience. This is about Subhuti Chandra. Occasionally, he does cite Panini Sutras. So the question is whether you have any opinion about why he would cite Panini on those few instances.
I think this has happened in case of Unadi rules, for which there is no Chandra rule. So that's what I feel. That Unadi Sutras, there are no parallels in Chandra tradition. Sometimes in such cases, he has certainly quoted Panini. Then there are cases where a verb is not found in Chandra Dhatu Patha, or it is different from what we find in Subhuti Chandra's manuscripts. So in such cases, he has quoted. At least that's what my mind immediately.
Well, now we have exhausted our time. It's exactly 90 minutes. So thank you very much, Dr. Lata. We're very grateful for this lecture. Thank you to everyone for participating. I should mention that we will have the next lecture on October 5th by Catherine Dalton. So please do check our website on this lecture. And again, with many thanks to Dr. Lata Deokar, I learned a lot from this lecture personally. I'm very, very grateful. So goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Bye-bye.